I've been trying to figure out what the secret sauce is that made and makes Bridgerton work as well as it does. And I think I've come up with the formula. When it launched, it was a genuine phenomenon, and that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. It doesn't surprise me either that the show is still going, although I do think the show has somewhat got in its own way, some of which I want to unpick in this free-form ramble that we're all going to indulge in together here today. Why did it hit the way that it did? These are the 4 things that make Bridgerton work. Compelling world building with really beautiful aesthetics, clearly identifiable, traceable, and understandable main plots, well delivered, interesting, applicable subplots, all of which is delivered with charisma. That's Bridgerton. That's a successful season of Bridgerton. So if that's our criteria, how would we evaluate the previous seasons? Season 2, which happened in 2022, for me, is the best full season of Bridgerton that has been released. In my opinion, it balances all of the criteria that I have named the best out of everything that we have so far. How so? Well, let's start with the trope. So we know what we're getting into. This is an enemies to lovers trope. Anthony and his romantic lead, Kate, are going to be 2 people who fuck their way into feelings with one another. It's kind of my favorite trope, but you know, what are you gonna do? The reason I think that season 2 is the strongest is I'm gonna start with where I thought season 1 was the weakest, aesthetics. I think season 2 blends the historical and the fantastical the best out of all of them so far. Kate and her family are shown as being Indian in origin, and the show incorporates that into the design of their costumes, into the colors, into the fabrics that they use, into the jewelry that the women and her family wear. Like, the Indian influence is absolutely everywhere in the Sharma household. And in the character and costuming designs as they're put forward. I think they fixed the silhouette problems from the first season, so we're clearly dealing with a Regency, silhouette, but they make the grooming and styling a bit more modern in a way that serves the fantastical narrative of the story a bit better. Like, they gave Anthony a haircut, thank God. I think season 2 is when they started to play within the boundaries of the world that they had created to better outcomes, if that makes any sense. I've referenced this before. I love Queen Charlotte's wigs. I think that they are masterfully done. I think that they are some of the epitome of their craft, that blend of textured hairstyles and black modern hairstyles or styling with 18th century drama when it comes to the wigs is perfection. And I think that some of the wigs from season 2 that she does are some of the best in the show, personally speaking. I also think that the costuming for the extras, for the staff, for other people, starts to come into its own more. In other words, I feel like the aesthetics and the world building really solidify in season 2, thanks to things like set design, costuming, styling, and grooming in a way that felt a little bit all over the place in season 1. As for the main plot and the subplots, I think season 2, again, does a fantastic job of taking the place settings that were laid out for us from season 1 and building on it. Season 1 set up Anthony to be the lead of season 2 really well. He was a subplot in season 1 and becomes the main in season 2. The storylines that he dealt with in season 1 directly apply in season 2. The tension that he feels with his position and his obligations, and the things that he actually wants and yearns for is his storyline in season 2. Planting and payoff, love it. I also really like how season 2 specifically chose to expand the backstory of the Bridgerton family and Anthony in particular. We see what it means for a very close and loving family to have lost a father very young. We see what it means for Antony as a very young man, I think a teenager, to have become the man of his house in this society, which might be more racially integrated, but is still clearly very patriarchal. The ton is still the ton, even though it might be better in some ways. It's still a historical romance, and gender dynamics are still a main component in most historical romances. This is contrasted really well with Kate, who's also, the oldest child in her family. She feels a huge amount of responsibility to see her half-sister marry incredibly well, to make sure that her stepmother and half-sister are cared for. But also because, one of her subplots is she's got a deal going with her stepmother's parents to try and get her half-sister married off really advantageously, so that her stepmother will be cared for. So she's got the same kind of pressures to provide. Even though she's not a man the way Antony is, they experience subplots that relate to one another in a way that fosters the main story incredibly intelligently. Over across the street, the Featheringtons are getting up to all kinds of shenanigans. Lord Featherington died in season 1, leaving his wife and daughters penniless. And so now Lady Featherington is all aflutter of how does she maintain her household, her position, the opportunities that will afford her daughters? How does she secure her daughters and thereby her own safety and security in this world without fortune or titles? The whole subplot here is a new cousin who's inherited comes to town, and he's a fraudster and a criminal, and hijinks ensue. But even that works as a subplot because once again, it reinforces the world building. It reinforces the patriarchal nature of the society, the pressures that women in particular face to marry, why a woman like Lady Featherington would behave the way that she does is actually made sympathetic and understandable, even though she's still a somewhat silly and ridiculous character, and that's through the writing and by design. It's not for no reason. Like, she makes sense as a character, and the pressures that she faced feel very real. And also thereby we understand that the pressures that other women in the world face. Why a bunch of debutantes will be throwing themselves at Antony to marry him, because whether or not they, are as poor as the Featheringtons are now, marriage offers women security in this world. Title offers women prestige and safety in this world. Of course women want that. And Antony knows that, and that's what he's banking on and trying to make a partnership. Unfortunately, he is head over tits in lust with Kate Sharma, which brings me to chemistry. Season 2 has chemistry. Ooh boy, Jonathan Bailey is so good at yearning. My God. Jonathan and Simone, the two main actors for season 2, oh my God, they're eye acting. They can eye fuck each other for England. Like, it's incredible. They have some of the best chemistry in the show. And I just, golly, it's so good. It's so good. They have fantastic steamy scenes. They just have, if Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley has, the hand flexes, Anthony Bridgerton catches whiffs of Kate's scent and it just sends him into a feral craze. We love to see it. So from everything from the continuation and, in my opinion, improvement of the aesthetics and the world building, from the satisfying planting and payoff of the enemies to lovers tropes that are set up and the character beats that deliver on it, from the subplots that supplement the main plot and also reinforce the world building and the chemistry, season 2 is the most solid. Season 3. We ought to talk about season 3 because, in my opinion, season 3 could have derailed all of Bridgerton. And it's a testament to, the fun and the whimsy and the appeal of the world, of the genuine talent of, the whole cast, for the, aesthetic appeal of the production, that it didn't derail the whole TV show. Because in my opinion, season 3 Season 3 was bad, and I don't know if enough time has passed that we're allowed to say that or not, but you know, I'm gonna say it. Priors. Nicola Coughlan is luminous. She's beautiful. She's a fantastic actress. She worked her ass off in that season in so many ways, but what she and the others were given to work with, just in my opinion, overcorrected and could have derailed the whole thing. Let's go back to aesthetics again. In the same way that season 1 felt to me like they didn't quite get the balance between historical period piece and historical fantasy right, season 3 also didn't get the balance right, but in the complete opposite direction. The costuming in season 3 went off in a wild and wrong direction. Again, I'm not judging the costumes based on historical reality. This is not a historically accurate show. I don't expect it to be. I expect it to be fantastical. But whereas season 2, I thought, explored things like color and fabric and accessories and embellishment and styling in a really good way, I thought season 3 went off the fucking rails. To me, at least, as a non-connoisseur. As a non-expert, the colors got brighter and more like neon or vibrant in a way that felt synthetic. Whereas the first 2 seasons, the colors might have been bolder, particularly in the Sharma household with its East Asian influence, but they felt like they made sense in the world. This was like going from black and white to Technicolor in season 3. Everything got over embellished to a really, really kind of bizarre degree. In the character particularly of Cressida, but not just her, season 3 kind of exploded not just in color and texture, but literally volume. In a way to me that felt a lot more like the excessive embellishment of the 1830s, when kind of the Jane Eyre period with the huge big skirts and sleeves and the wild hairstyles that you will have seen in like Wives and Daughters, the Elizabeth Gaskells, the more Dickensian kind of stuff, the kind of the earlier Victorian period. That was a style of like embellishment to the point of ugly, in my opinion. And that's what season 3 felt like to me. It felt like we were inching closer to that time period, while we know that historically we weren't. So the hard pivot to like bigger, volumized, wackier hair, which I don't hate in theory, again, see my love for Queen Charlotte's wigs. But it didn't feel right with the Regency setting of the rest of the show. It veered way too far off. Not only that, the styling got really weird. We went back to more ahistoric hairstyles with a lot of grown women wearing their hair down, which is anachronistic. But not only that, like the makeup in this season got a lot bolder in a way that felt like a departure from the previous seasons. And I don't think it served the story well. I found it aesthetically jarring because it was such a departure. It felt like we were in a differently designed show as a result. I'm sure someone much more intelligent than me can comment on this, but it had a cheapening effect to me. The fabric looked cheaper because it was so clearly synthetic fabrics or synthetic dyes, to achieve a synthetic color. The over embellishment, the over painting of the faces. Like there's been a lot of jokes made about how season 3, yassified its main characters and leads. And unfortunately, I think that criticism is correct. And again, with such an aesthetic departure from the first 2 seasons of the show that it felt jarring as a result. I didn't like it. And my dislike doesn't stop there. I'm gonna come out and say it. I thought that the main storyline was kind of the weakest one. The trope here is friends to lovers as opposed to enemies to lovers in season 2. We know that Penelope has been yearning for and pining for Colin across the street for her whole life. But, Colin has been off on an adventure, traveling around the world, doing the Young Men's Grand Tour, and he comes back and his characterization is just kind of uneven in this. He's set up as kind of this cinnamon roll, sweet, lovely brother, which is how he's been played for the first 2 seasons. You know, in his courtship with Marina, he was prepared to go through with a marriage to her to get her out of trouble. He's never really shown himself to be, you know, a ladies' man or a rake in the way that Antony was. He's just kind of a sweet, lovable guy. But apparently in season 3, he comes back and he's Ricky Suavo or what have you. He's shown, you know, charming the ladies and cavorting with courtesans and having threesomes and what have you. And not that I think any of those things are bad, like you do you, I'll come back to that. But for his character, it seemed weird. And again, it seemed like such a departure from what had been written previously that I just really didn't buy Colin as a rake. And it felt kind of forced to try and get him into that sort of characterization. Like, I buy that Penelope is in love with him. I also just think that Colin is like the least appealing of the Bridgerton brothers to me, so I don't get it personally, but I respect your choice. There are fun bits. The carriage scene set to Pitbull, gorgeous, love that. But the pacing was weird in this season. The pacing was weird. The characterizations didn't quite make sense. The yassification didn't quite make sense. There is kind of the weird mid-season jolt where Penelope and Colin get married, which is kind of the end point of romance. I'm not mad that it happens, but it means that our main storyline in some ways has to wrap up or is more forced in its pacing than the other subplot. Speaking of feeling forced, there are too many subplots in season 3. And those subplots somewhat take us out of the main story of our main characters. If the main story of season 3 is supposed to be that friends to lovers pipeline, and again, for me, the secret sauce of Bridgerton is subplots that support that main one, the subplots in season 3, you know, kind of get in the way of the main story in a way that I found really frustrating. There is the subplot, of course, of the Queen trying to unmask Lady Whistledown. There is the subplot of Cressida trying to avoid being married off and thereby trying to claim Lady Whistledown's identity for her own to collect an inheritance, or rather a prize, so that she can live independently. There is the weird fact of her and Eloise's friendship in season 3, forced as it is. There was the Mondrich's subplot, which I love them as characters, but like trying to force them into the Ton via their son inheriting a property and an estate and a title took us away from our main characters and the main conflict to be overcome, which is the fact that Penelope is Lady Whistledown. Again, spoilers. And she has to come clean to her now husband about this, and they have to kind of sort that out. There's other subplots that I forgot. Golly, I forgot about it. Lord Debling, the lovely vegetarian ornithologist, I think, who was courting Penelope. I think she should have married him. Like, great, she can marry a nice man who would treat her well, and he'd fuck off to go, study things for most of the year, and she could, have her independence to do whatever she wants. Like, that sounds great to me. Sorry, I just don't like Colin. That's a subplot that theoretically, should further the main story of spearing Colin and Penelope to be together, but it didn't quite work because Debling was kind of charming, and again, at least I see the appeal of him, and then like the weird slow motion balloon crash that was very silly and stupid to watch. I don't know, like it took up too much time and too much attention and too much energy, and didn't further the main plot nearly enough. Not only that, again, across the street, we have the Featherington shenanigans. Lady Featherington is trying her damnedest to get her daughters, who she's married off, to get pregnant to bear the next Featherington heir to keep the money and the title in the family. I actually like the Featherington subplot in this case because it adds humor to the story. Penelope's two sisters are very silly and very funny, and their shenanigans with their new husbands, I think, are a lot of, fun. There's a lot of charming humor, again, about sexual exploration and development, which is a theme in romance, and I think is actually the element that ties back to season 1 and season 2 more successfully than any of the other subplot material. Like, I love that Colin and Penelope, get some hand action in a carriage to Pitbull. I love it. That's Bridgerton. That's fun. And I think that it's great. But most of the other humor and fun in this season for me came from the side characters, not from the main one. Ultimately, season 3 culminates in Penelope outing herself to the whole town as Lady Whistledown. And to me, this is one of the weirdest and most awkward parts of the show. In the book series, Penelope's identity as Lady Whistledown is held secret for a very long time, but we find out at the end of season 1 that Penelope is Lady Whistledown. She is the gossip monger for the town. She's the one who writes this newsletter that everyone reads for all of the gossip that frames this whole series. And I actually didn't mind the reveal of her as Lady Whistledown at the end of season 1. I thought that was a fun cliffhanger. I thought, okay, this is interesting. Again, if you're watching the TV show as opposed to reading the books, you're like, ooh, okay, we have to stay invested in the Featherington family, not just the Bridgertons, because Penelope is quite literally integral to this world and this narrative building. I didn't mind that change. I thought it was weird, however, that Eloise figures out who Penelope is in season 2 and chooses to keep that secret. Obviously, it sets up the conflict for season 3 where Eloise chooses to pal around with Cressida as opposed to Penelope. Like, I get it, but it changes the stakes of the entire world building in a way that forces, in my opinion, Penelope to come clean in season 3. Like, the writing sets it up, but I don't think it makes sense for the show more broadly because we still have 5 seasons of television to get through. Like, the showrunners have said that there's going to be a season for each sibling. You have outed your main narrator, who was a secret hidden narrator, in season 3. I thought it was the weakest part of the show. It changes the stakes of the whole world. And I was really confused as to how they were going to handle this. I actually think, all things considered, that for the first part of season 4, they've handled it better than I anticipated. Penelope trying to confront the realities of being Lady Whistledown in public, contending with a new sense of public responsibilities associated with her role as, a diarist of the town, as opposed to someone who could write anonymously. So, I mean, they've surprised me pleasantly, but I really do wonder how this is going to work for 4 more seasons of television. I also just didn't buy that after, hunting down Whistledown for 3 seasons, that the Queen would just be like, okay, well, I guess you can keep doing this job. Again, it felt like such a forced conflict and such a forced resolution. Everything about season 3 to me just felt forced. And for a lot of reasons, I think that's because in the way that season 1 did a good job of setting Antony up as the protagonist of season 2, I felt like season 2 was actually laying good groundwork for Benedict to be the main character of season 3. Benedict was on his, journey of self-discovery, trying to figure out who he is as the second son, dabbling with art, exploring his own sexuality and having a great time. Good for him. But there wasn't anything for me in season 2 that actually set up Penelope and Colin to be the protagonists of season 3 the way that they were. And I thought that by moving their storyline forward instead of leaving it more towards the end, as the books do, that it changes the whole stakes of the Bridgerton universe in a way that doesn't really serve the story. Basically, to me, like, as much as I love Nicola Coughlan, and I do, I think she's beautiful. I think she's talented. I think I think her acting pulls off much weaker writing and pacing to me. But for me, season 3 of Bridgerton was a real needle scratch. So when season 4 part 1 hit, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit nervous. I was a little bit nervous to see if Bridgerton had permanently lost the sauce.